So far, everyone's been up here and telling wonderful stories about working together, and people come together and what happens when they do that. So I thought, gosh, I got to tell a story too. So I'm going to tell you a story about what happens when research and patients drink beer together. That's the best we can do, but it's maybe it'll work. So this is a group that I lead called the Scleroderma Patient-Centered Intervention Network. And to give a little bit of background before we talk about how the beer got us to where we are now, Scleroderma is a rare autoimmune connective tissue disease, and I can only give you the psychologist version of it, but it's a collagen building process where, if you were to fall and hurt yourself and scab over, you'd form a scab, and it would then perform its task, finish with what it was doing, and your scab would go away. And in Scleroderma, this is a process, is an autoimmune disease that's running rampant. So Scleroderma means hard skin in Greek. It's where the term comes from. It's a very diverse disease in terms of manifestations and symptoms. So some people might have skin manifestations where their skin hardens and they face discomfort and ulcers and pain. There's facial disfiguration and changing of the shape of the face and so forth. Others have this process going on in the heart and the lungs, some of the other organs. Pulmonary arterial hypertension is a comorbid. If you go in a PAH clinic, oftentimes half the patients are Scleroderma patients, depending where you are. So, and I think that now, if you look at almost any rare disease, and again, I was trained as a psychologist and I do a number of things now, but that's my background. And if you think about what it means to live with a rare disease, it's the experience of being alone. Now, you could be alone because you're in the north of one of our provinces up north in Quebec, and there's no one with your disease for God knows how many hundreds of kilometers. It could be because you're in Montreal and you're alone, even no matter how many people are around you, because there are very few people with it. You, as other people have discussed, you have symptoms. They're very difficult to put together symptoms. No one knows what's happening. You've gone to X number of doctors. You've gotten diagnosed with a number of things. This is largely a female disease, so many of the women get sent to psychiatrists, right? Because they have these diffuse symptoms, their muscle weakness and other things that happen. And of course, if this is another trap not to fall into. If you can't explain it to a doctor, it doesn't mean it's not there. If your doctor can't explain it, it doesn't mean it's not there, right? So in any case, but it is a story of being often alone. They're often alone socially, often alone not knowing what you have, and in terms of finding services. Are there treatments for your disease? Are there social and educational and rehabilitation services or people who know how to help you? And often there aren't. So when I talked about getting together with patients and drinking beer, so I actually worked at Johns, when I came through as a psychologist, I worked at Johns Hopkins on a burn unit, and I kind of fell into Scleroderma serendipitously because I kind of came to McGill. I was hired for something else, quantitative research, but did this kind of work. And then one of the rheumatologists said, what about Scleroderma? Would you be interested in working with us on our projects? And actually, in Scleroderma and burns are fairly similar in some of what people face in living with them. So I happened to get into this. And when we started doing this, there really wasn't any research there on what the problems were that people face on a day-to-day basis. I mean, way back when I started 10 or 11 years ago, we got a small meeting grant from CIHR to bring people together that had actually written anything on living with Scleroderma. And we invited all 3 people who had written anything, and they all came to Montreal. And we actually had about 3 researchers, my team, and about 5 or 6 patients from around Canada with the disease who came to the table. But after a couple of years, there's a woman, a marvelous, tremendously talented and motivated woman named Maureen Salve, who you might know. They're sponsoring you through Scleroderma Canada, who has the disease. And we're sitting there one time and said, we're all in these rare diseases. We're running around documenting all the kind of problems people have with these. When are we going to do something about it? And the official story used to be that we were sitting over coffee on Sherbrooke Street, but now as we're more confident in our success, we were drinking beer. And so we said, well, what are we going to do about this? We need, we should do something. But in the end, it's not, what would you want to do? You want to actually, from a social educational supports perspective, have that people with rare diseases have access to the same kind of things that people with many common diseases have. If you have arthritis or diabetes or heart disease, and you need rehabilitation, there'll be somebody who knows how to take care of you. There might be a support group. There'll be educational material. People are probably in your medical training familiar with this, arthritis self-management programs or chronic disease self-management programs and so forth. But none of these exist for any rare disease. And it's not so easy to, as people talked earlier, about going out and developing programs, testing programs, and then disseminating programs. Because even here at the Jewish General in Montreal, we have a fairly large Scleroderma center, and they're strapped with resources to take care of the 200 or 300 people that come through their center from all around Quebec. And we started doing this. There were about 7,000 rare diseases, and we looked for examples that people had developed these kind of interventions, done a trial and disseminated them. And we actually found one that even had 100 people in it, which is very, very small for this kind of trial, because we're not doing things like turning diseases on their heads with molecules. We're trying to help improve lives, or, help people provide skills and training so they can cope a little bit better. And these trials usually need 300, 400, 500 people in them. But there was one 100 people that was on SARS, which is an avian flu, which isn't really such a hot ticket anymore. But that was the one that was classified as a rare disease, did a trial. So we set out and we brought together people from around the world. In Scleroderma, the one thing that's nice about rare diseases, as Ian mentioned earlier, is that you do have people who are present. You do have people who are very motivated to do something. And both I found, at least in Scleroderma, in the patient community, it's tremendously motivated, and the physician and healthcare provider community. So it's an international community, but it's a fairly small one. And Scleroderma is common for a rare disease. So rare diseases are, we talk about diseases where Ian said he was one of a dozen people in Canada. Scleroderma has about 16,000 approximately. So the definition is to be rare, you're fewer than 1 in 2,000 people. But we decided we wanted to be able to develop, test, and disseminate tools that people could use in a rare disease. Initially for Scleroderma, but also as a model for doing that in other rare diseases around the world. But again, it was a challenge because no one had done this before. And it's really we've talked about data, we've talked about all sorts of things. But this is really an organizational challenge in some ways. It's a challenge of working together and pooling your resources. So one of the first things we did is we pulled together groups of patients, patient organizations, healthcare providers, and researchers from around the world to begin to work on this problem. And we decided the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we, work together around the world, that no city, no province, or no country was going to be able to do this on our own, that we had to actually use an international network for working with patients, recruiting patients, doing the research, that we had to deliver our tools virtually. And again, I talked about here at the Jewish, we have one of the better Scleroderma centers in Canada, but they don't have the resources. Ideally, everyone with a rare disease, everyone with Scleroderma would be able to see a psychologist who knows what they're doing in the disease, or a rehabilitation specialist. But that's not the reality. And they all many patients will tell you stories. They have terrible contractures and ulcering in hands, and trying to go to a rehab therapist and get therapy either doesn't treat them because they don't know what to do, or sometimes hurts them. Once in a while, there's someone who's able to do it. So we decided right off the bat that we could run a trial, publish our trial, and go on our way, but if we did it in a face-to-face setting, it was going to be a card trick. Once we did it and folded our tent, it was over. And we had to have a way that we could actually do not just one trial, but actually test things that were important to people, address problems important to people on an ongoing basis, and that we had to be able to deliver it to them afterwards inexpensively. And what I'll say is we're going to do it free of charge to people. So, and what we did is we came up with a novel. We're one of the first groups in the world to use something called a CMRCT, or a cohort multiple RCT model. And again, a lot of these things they're very human problems, but they're very management issues on the other side, and how you solve these problems. And so what we did is we went out and we developed a network of about 45 centers around the world now. And each of these centers recruits participants with Scleroderma to every 3 months they go online, complete measures that talk about the different kinds of problems they're facing that are important to them. And then what we do is we have a standing group of people who every 3 months complete measures, and every time we develop one of these interventions, we can go into that cohort and select people who are having difficulty with that problem and ask them if they want to try the intervention. We basically run trials through this cohort on an ongoing basis. One of the most important things that we do, I mentioned we have a lot of people involved, is that the specific programs that we develop were all chosen by our patient partners. So when we started this, again, we had patients around the table. And having patients around the table and being involved, it's important for a number of reasons. One, because they know their disease. You get good advice. 2, because they make doctors and researchers behave better. and I honestly mean that, when you're around a table of 20 people around the world and people are sometimes politicking about who's going to do what, if something's a novel enough intervention to fund, when the patient groups say this is the one that's important to us, it cuts through everything and ends the conversation. It's a really important factor. I mean, it's just crucial. So at SPIN, we have a patient advisory board that oversees about 10 people from around about 6 countries. They have all patients that oversee our program. The chair and the co-chair of the patient advisory board sit on our steering committee. And then these are all different interventions that we've been building over the years, and I'll show you a couple of examples. And each of these programs has a team that builds them, and the team is composed of 2 or 3 patients at least, researchers, developers, so forth. And usually the newer ones, we've gotten better at this, is every time we start a project, we have an advisory board of 8 to 10 patients that right from the beginning starts working on the project with us. So again, we try to do a number of interventions. Right now we're doing a trial that's funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research on hand exercises, all online. Next in line, which is also funded by the CHR, is a self-management program that's tailored for scleroderma. And we have one right now we're going out for that coach or coping with appearance changes, which basically helps people cope with the idea, if you live with a disease like scleroderma, you walk into a room, you look different, and you draw unwanted attention, yet you're the only one in the room who has any expertise in dealing with it. And some people are quite good at doing this on their own, and other people can benefit sometimes from some tips and ideas on how to manage those situations. And all of the programs we develop, these are just a few screenshots because it's a short program here. But this is the hand program, but they're all modular programs that deal with different aspects of the problem. They have video. And again, we have to be able to do these in a way that people can either do them, or if they have a physician who they're working with, can go in and interact with them, but also be able to do these things on their own. So they're all easy to use. They have videos that show everything they're doing. All the videos have scripts and instructions. They have information about different problems that they might be facing, and when they should actually need to see someone to get help about some things, when they might be tailoring the exercise in a different way. And also we have patient stories through here that talk about their experiences using the programs and so forth. These are all from our hand intervention. We have a lot of nice graphics here. This is from the self-management program. We have modules on interacting with healthcare professionals, which is, again, as Ian talked about, is quite a challenge in rare diseases and how to prepare for those and maximize your ability to get what you need, controlling with pain and so forth. And we just got another trial funded by CHR too, where this is actually, again, this is unique that no one's done this in the world, but there are other things I was doing so far, running through this cohort we have, and we put them all online. This one's a little bit different because one thing that patients do, it's pretty amazing, is that across Canada and North America, less so in Europe, but in North America it's quite common, that people start support groups, they're grassroots organizations, and they run support groups locally. They're tough to run if you think about the model, because it involves a person who has a really bad disease, who doesn't usually have training for doing this kind of thing, trying to support a bunch of other people with a really bad disease. So and when I go back to the beers I was having out here in Sherbrooke with Maureen, she said, we go out to our support groups all the time, and we ask them for all sorts of stuff. We need to be able to give them back something sometime. So 9 years later, we just got this funded. We were actually, we took first in our panel at CHR to get it funded to do this. It was a nice idea, but we built this with a team of 10 support group leaders who worked this over the last number of years. We put together research, we piloted it with them. They came to Montreal, they shot videos of, they had a great team, video crew that shot vignettes of them role-playing difficult patients in groups and other kinds of scenarios that they can discuss in the training program. And this one we deliver is 13 weeks on video conferencing. So this one is actually not, unlike the do-it-yourself online stuff, this one is a group of 6 support group leaders that get together with a trainer, and 13 weeks they go online, they go through material, they discuss, they have a chat room afterwards and go through it. This is a really exciting program. This took a long time to get off the ground, but it's unique even for common diseases. They haven't done this before, but this is something too that we can actually use for rare diseases generally, but we'll start in scleroderma. I think it's easily disseminatable to other groups. And now we're even beginning to, I still think of people we know. There's a guy out in Vancouver named Bob Buzza, who's now in his mid-80s, who every time I saw him at the beginning said, whose sister had the disease, said, when are you going to do something about caregivers? So now we're starting to work with caregivers also, and we're just beginning to do some of the background work we need to develop some kind of program. And I think one of the key things is that we work now with Scleroderma Canada, Scleroderma Quebec, have been our main partners, the provincial partners groups across Canada, but now we work with about 18 or 20 groups across the world. And the thing about, I talked about delivery of these things, that we've been very adamant from the beginning. So we're right now running our trials, and when our first trial is done this fall on our hand program, our trial is actually done in Europe. I'm sorry, just done in North America. It's done everywhere except France. So never try to run a trial in France. This is a sign. We've been in their ethics since 2016. And at some point, they went in for 3 months. They came back and asked us how many computers we had. And I said, I don't know. All my computers go somewhere out in space. Well, how do you count that? Anyway, but we're going to finish this thing this fall. And when we're done, all these organizations are going to have a link on their websites, and they're going to do what we do promotion through social media. They'll do their promotion, and you can go as a patient to any of these sites, and you can click on the spin page. They'll bring you to a server in Montreal, and they can use these programs as they wish without charge. And just to wrap up, this is a fairly old picture. I had less gray hair, but I prefer it that way. And we'll keep showing that picture forever. No, but this is part of our ex team in Montreal. I'll have to update that picture. So thank you.